In this video tutorial, we'll be looking at how to make a game object appear to look at the mouse. So something like having an eye that can follow the mouse around the screen and look up and down and left and right. For a quick example of the kind of thing we'll be able to make, I'll just jump into a test that I made earlier on. I'll hit play. And when it loads, you'll see that this eyeball appears to follow my mouse around the screen, looking up and down and left and right somewhat accurately. So that it really does seem to follow this object around, and you can move it around as fast as you want and it follows. So you guys know what to do right from the start, I'll create a new scene. You can either click File, New Scene, or hit Control N like I will now. That will make a new empty 3D world that you can put objects into, and you can save it as another scene. We'll call this one test1.unity and save, and we'll see that now it's been added to this set of scenes that we've already got saved. So this is just the default scene, only has a main camera in it to begin with. Now what we need in order to make this kind of mouse tracking to work, well, what I should do is just quickly explain how I'm going to be doing this. What I will do is, let's just find the camera there, is I will be making the camera have a plane in front of it all the time. So I'll go game object, create other plane, and we will click and drag that in this hierarchy tab so it goes into the main camera. Click and drag plane over main camera and it will just automatically be parented to main camera. Now what we'll do to center it is to go up here and type in 0 tab 0 tab 0. That will center it on the main camera. So if we click on the camera itself, we'll see the preview. We'll be able to see the plane if we rotate the plane, say 90 degrees. If we hold down to control, remember, control will snap to increments of about 15 degrees. Then we'll move this out from the camera a little bit. Now if we click on the camera, we'll see the plane. It just looks like a giant grey thing, but that's because the plane's flat. You don't have any details to make the surface look any different than just one colour of grey. Now what we need for every single scene that we'll be creating is a directional light to add lighting to the scene. Give it a bit of a dynamic feel as you move around. We'll just point that in some arbitrary direction. Doesn't really matter where it's looking. Okay, and now if we look back at this camera, you'll see that it's turned this plane white. So what we're actually going to be doing to make it look like an object is following the mouse around, is we will be casting what's called a ray, which is a straight line. We'll be casting a ray from the camera in the direction underneath the mouse. So if the mouse is sitting up in the top right hand corner, that ray will actually be coming out of this camera, going up and to the right a little bit. Now you don't need to worry about how that maths works. We actually use a little Unity function in our script, which you'll see later on, to achieve that, to make that ray work the way we want it to. And what happens when we cast that line from this point and forwards is it'll hit this plane, and we'll be able to find the point that it hits that plane and make some 3D object look at that point. Because when you're talking about making an object in Unity look at something, you need to give it a three-dimensional location in space, or the transform of another object which has a three-dimensional location in space. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing as an explanation. I'll just step through the next bit, which is adding an object that will do the looking. So right now we've got the plane, we've got our camera, but we don't have an object to look. So we'll go to Imported Models, and I've used a little plugin for SketchUp called PlayUp to get an eye. So I'll click and drag this into our scene. Now one thing to note as well is that this eye is really tiny when we first put it in the scene. If we center that at 0, 0, 0, click the eye, type in 0, tab 0, tab 0. And let's hide this plane by clicking it and unticking Mesh Renderer. That will make it disappear because the mesh is not being rendered anymore once you untick that. If you want it to come back, you tick that box again and it'll come back. But we'll never need to see this plane. We only need the Mesh Collider, which collides this line on it to get that point. So make sure you leave Mesh Collider ticked when you're running this script, otherwise it won't work. So yeah, if we look at this camera here, we'll see in the preview, you might not even be able to make it out, so I'll just have to hit play. The eye is actually really, really tiny, so I'm just going to size it up, just so we'll be able to see it looking around and all that. So I'll select it, click and drag, can select a bunch of objects or one tiny object that you can't find very easily. And in scale, we'll type something like 10, tab 10, tab 10. See how big that looks now. And what we'll do is we'll move it a bit closer to the camera. So we'll click on the camera now and we'll have a little preview there. So it's still a bit small, so how about we size it up again? We'll make it 25, 25, 25. Now if we click back on the main camera, we'll see that it's a reasonable size now, so I think we can work with that. So what we need to do now is, for this eye, attach a script. So we'll look under my scripts here, and I've made a simple version of this script that should be hopefully a little bit easier to understand. This other one we won't really bother looking at. I will provide the code for it if people are interested though. So we'll click and drag this script onto the eye. And losing prefab connection, that's fine. That just means that this eye is some default object saved in the project. And by adding this script, we're changing this instance of the eye so it's different from that default. But we do want that to be different because we want the script attached. So we'll just say continue, and that will add the script to our eye, and we'll notice it's no longer a prefab because it's no longer colored blue in the hierarchy. So here we've got my script. We've got we need to provide the mouse plane, a camera, a plane offset which says how far the plane is from the camera, and a mouse location indicator, which can just be a little sphere or something, so you can tell where the mouse is in 3D space according to the eye or whatever object you've chosen. Now you don't have to give a object for mouse location indicator. The script does check whether or not you've given it one, and if you don't give it one, it will work just fine and it will still look at the mouse. It just won't have a 3D object representing where the mouse is. And you also don't need to give it a camera because it will default to the main camera that you have in the scene as long as its tag up here says tag, as long as the tag says main camera. So for this script, you don't need to give it a camera because it knows that the main camera, tagged main camera, is the one that you want, and you don't need to give it mouse location indicator because it doesn't need to show where the mouse is in 3D space. All it needs is a mouse plane, really, and some value for a plane offset. So what we'll do is we'll click on the eye here, and we will click and drag this plane that we put in the camera. Let me unhide that so you can see it again. This plane we will click and drag from the hierarchy and over our plane, our mouse plane variable in our script. So now it's been assigned this plane object. So if we click on the eye, we'll see it's now assigned. So I think right now we're good to go. So the first thing we should do is hide this plane. Turn off the mesh renderer so the camera can see through it and see the eye. See right there, there's the preview, you can see the eye, and if you bring the plane back, enable the mesh renderer, click the camera again, and you'll just see it's turned white because all I can see is the plane. So you want the plane hidden. Can't stress that enough. Now if I hit play, we will see that the eye will react to where this mouse is, but it's not looking around that much. And furthermore, if we use the little scene tab I've got down here, click on it, it's just another 3D editor, but it lets us look at the scene while we're playing the level. Alternatively, by default, Unity has the scene in the game tab up here. You can click this scene tab and look around your level while it's frozen in-game or doing something in-game. But I like to have the scene tab over here so I can do something in-game and at the same time see what's happening to it down in the scene level, and vice versa. I can move an object around in the scene and see it in the game. So what we'll see to begin with is, well, this eye is not actually looking anywhere in the direction of the camera. And if we click play to stop it playing, we'll notice that that's actually because what I've done with this script to make an object look at the camera is I've taken this blue axis here, the blue axis for the object, and I just make that point directly towards the camera. So this part of the eye, the bit that we actually in reality want to look at the camera, just stays looking up, and this pivots around and points up towards the camera there, this blue axis. So what we need to do is a little trick that you'll use potentially quite a bit in Unity when you're bringing in 3D models and they end up pointing the wrong way. What you do is you create an empty game object, create empty, and then what you can do is we'll just quickly center this in the origin. You don't need to do that, but I find it handy personally. 0 tab 0 tab 0. So now it's at the origin over there. We'll move the eye back to the origin so they're in exactly the same location. And now what I'm going to do is I will click and drag the eye into this game object. So now I've parented the eye to the empty game object. And what I will do now is I'll hit, you can hit, remember, Q, W, E and R when you've got an object selected will change the way that you can manipulate it. Just the same as in 3ds Max and Maya. So W lets you move it up, down, left, right, E lets you rotate it, and R lets you scale it in 3 different directions. Now what you want to do is select the game, is to select the eye, sorry, not the game object, select the eye and make its iris point in the right direction. So we'll hold control and make it rotate 90 degrees backwards. So you see that X has changed to 90 degrees now. And if we click on game object instead of I and then hit W, we will now see that the eye is pointing in the direction of this blue axis. So what we need to do now that we've got the eye looking in the right direction according to game object, what we'll do is we'll click our we'll remove the script from I, right click on it, on the name of it, and click remove component. And then we'll go to game object and we'll attach the script to that instead. Click and drag look at mouse simple onto game object. And now we need to reassign the mouse plane, so we'll click and drag that up to here. And if we hit play, now the eye will be looking in the right direction because we've rotated it back a little bit. And you'll notice another little thing here is that the eye isn't moving around that much. It's not looking up, down, left and right as far as we would want it to in order to really seem like it's looking at the mouse on the screen. Now, this is a problem with human perception of where the mouse is. In the game, we think the mouse in 3D space should be really close to where the eye is. But what's happened in Unity, if we look in Unity, in the editor, and if I select this plane, what's happened is this plane is still very close to the mouse. So what we can do is either move this eye closer to the camera, so I'll select it, the game object, and I'll move it closer to the camera. Oop, see it flipping around a little bit. That's because it's trying to look at the camera while I'm moving it. So if I've moved it closer, it's now looking a little bit smoother, but not much more. What will help it a lot more, let me just stop playing and hit play again so the eyes reset its position to where it was. What can help it even more is if we move this plane, and we can move it in my script, we can move it using plane offset. Click and drag this number and increase it to some amount, and if I make this plane visible and you look down in this scene tab here, you can see that it should be getting offset a little bit. Hopefully it is. I'm not too sure if this is the way my script works because I wrote it a few days ago. Nope, evidently not. So we'll manually set it to something like, I don't know, 3 here. So it's going to be 3 meters in Unity in front of the camera instead of that 0.06, which is the default. So I'll hit play again now that we've manually changed it to 3. And now we'll see that the eye is looking up, down, left and right much further in reaction to where the mouse is. And if you want it to look further up, down, left and right, you put the plane closer to the eye. So you see here, the plane's actually been moved. It's probably a little bit hard to tell, but it's been moved forward substantially compared to where it was before. And if we move it manually even closer, that eye is going to be looking up, down, left and right really, really far. One thing to note though is you don't want to move this plane too far forward, because then the eye is going to be looking backwards to see where the plane is, and that just looks a bit silly. So ideally a good location is somewhere roughly halfway between the eye and the camera is a good place to put the plane, and it seems to look around just fine. Now for a quick look at how this code works, I'll jump over to it open in the editor here. Hopefully it's open. No, I'll just open it back up. Double click on it in the project and it opens up. Click on the editor and here we go. So I've commented it way more than I usually do. I usually tend to leave like, a few comments up the top saying what things generally do, and that's about it really. Very lazy coding, but I can generally read it. That's easy enough. So what we've got, let me break this down for anyone not too familiar with programming. What we've got is we declare all of our variables that will appear in the inspector. So the ones that we're able to change when we look at the script when it's attached to an object. So mouse plane, cam, plane offset, and mouse location indicator are all declared outside of any functions, just written up the top here so it's nice and easy to find when I'm looking for them. Now what we do here is we use the special start function in Unity, which runs before any updates are called at all. And we use the start function, I always use the start function to make sure all of my variables, the important variables in my script, have valid values that won't make the script crash. And if you can't run the script without it crashing, I make sure I remove the script so it won't run. And you do that by typing in destroy this. That'll remove the script as soon as possible. So stepping through the script, what I do in this start function is I first of all, the most important thing is to make sure we have a camera assigned to our camera variable. Otherwise, we won't know which camera the eye or whatever object should be looking at. So I make sure that there is at least a camera assigned, and if not, we have to remove the script because it will not run. The next thing that we make sure of is that the mouse plane is actually parented to the camera. So I force that because if the mouse plane isn't parented to the camera and you move the camera around, the object, the eye, will not look at the camera anymore. It'll be looking off somewhere else in space, or it'll be looking at a weird angle, which won't make sense. So the mouse plane will be hosted to the camera and should be, yes, it is perpendicular as well to the camera, so it will always look like the eye is looking at the mouse. Essentially, that's the result. And the next thing to really notice, I guess, is that I also make sure the plane is a reasonable distance away from the camera, so it's not behind the camera or something silly like that. Now the next thing is the update, which is used to make the eye look at the right thing every single frame that's drawn. So like I said, here's that ray that we cast from this camera into the plane, and we get it using a special function called screen point to ray. So you need to have a camera and a variable of type camera, and then use the function screen point to ray, and then if you want the mouse position, you type in input dot mouse position, and then this will give you a 3D line that points in some direction and starts at the camera. And the next thing I do is I find the point of intersection between the ray and the 3D plane that's in front of the camera. So this is another thing that Unity does very simply. You don't need to bother with any 3D maths or anything. You just need to say physics raycast, the ray that we made, and then something called hit info, which will get the position, amongst other things, of where this ray intersects that plane. And if this raycast actually returns a point of intersection, like if it possibly doesn't hit the plane for whatever reason, then it won't run this code at all. But if it does hit the plane, then it will make this transform, the transform of the game object this is attached to. So this game object here, because it has this script attached, its transform will look at the camera. Will look at, sorry, not the camera, will look at the point of intersection. So it'll look at where the intersection was. And then optionally, if you have a mouse location indicator attached, it will also make that look at the mouse location. Or, sorry, not look at, I'm getting a little bit tired, will make its position the location that the eye or whatever is looking at. So I'll give you a quick demo of how that works as well. I suppose just before I jump to that, I'll explain how I handle whether or not that variable has been assigned. It's very straightforward in Unity. You can check whether or not a variable has been assigned for things that are references, so things like game objects or transforms or cameras. You can say if variable name, then do this, and if this evaluates to true, then it exists and it's been assigned. But if it evaluates to false, then it hasn't been assigned, and the code inside this if statement will not run. So it's a good way to run code depending on whether or not something exists. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing for anyone who doesn't know scripting at all. Really not wanting to leave anyone behind. So what I'll do is I'll select the game object, and I will click and drag this thing that I made earlier that will indicate the location of our object. All it is a sphere with a little particle effect on it, but I just added it, made it before because it looks a little bit pretty. It's pretty. Mouse location indicator. Click and drag it over there. Actually, what we need is we need to click and drag the mouse location indicator into here, and then use that instance of it in here. Otherwise it won't appear because it doesn't exist yet in the hierarchy. So if I hit play now, it should make a little ball with a particle effect. And there we go. The eye's following it around, kind of. Keep in mind that I haven't manually moved the plane yet. But yeah, this is what the eye is looking at in 3D space. So yeah, I guess I'll upload this now, and I will upload this script as well as the other one for anyone adventurous who wants to make more than one thing look at an object. I guess actually what I should quickly do is I'll show you how you can make two eyes look. We've attached one script to one eye, and what we can do now is copy and paste this game object, so select it either here, or we can select the whole thing like that and hope we're not picking too many things, because at the moment we selected mouse location indicator too. So we'll just select the game object and cut and paste that, and we'll move it out of the way. And while I'm at it, I'll move this plane offset so it's much closer to where the eye actually is. So change it for both scripts. So there are our two eyes, and we'll hit play. And now if I move the mouse around, you'll see it, that both of these are following it. So it's just that easy, and you can attach it to any object and it'll look at the mouse. Just keep in mind to use an empty game object as the parent, and point the object this empty contains so it faces down the blue axis in Unity, and that's the only requirement that you have for this script to work. So you can do something very easily, like having a creepy skull or something that follows your character around or something like that when it goes into a room. Alright, I hope that helped.